Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon and good evening, depending on where you're connecting from. I am Sagnik Datta, your host today, and I'm part of the Citrix Ready technical marketing team managing the desktop ecosystem. Welcome to today's webinar and where we have AppSense with us. Let me welcome you all to the Citrix Ready technical webinar series where we showcase how Citrix and our partners have integrated to deliver valuable products and solutions to common problems faced by our customers. Along with me, I have our main speaker, Simon Townsend, Chief Technologist at AppSense. Moving on. To introduce Citrix Ready is an end-to-end technology partner program that showcases and recommends third-party products, solutions, and services that demonstrate compatibility with Citrix products. Customers can quickly and easily find solutions recommended by Citrix in the Citrix Ready marketplace hosted at citrix.com/ready. If you're interested to learn more about our partner program, you can navigate to the second link, partnerprogram/Citrix Ready. Moving on. Let me now give you a quick glimpse about AppSense. So AppSense are our premier Citrix Ready partner, and their integration covers a wide spectrum of our Citrix products: XenApp, XenDesktop, NetScaler. AppSense can configure, secure, personalize, and optimize the user environment regardless of how desktops and applications are being delivered. AppSense will enhance the user experience and protect your users by managing them independent to what platform is at play. AppSense been our partner since 1999, a solid 17 years, and is used by over 4,000 customers and over more than 8 million endpoints. AppSense reduces both CapEx and OpEx, and in addition, accelerate your desktop transformation projects. So without further ado, let me roll over the dice to our main speaker. One housekeeping item to everyone. Questions during the webinar will be addressed during our question and answer session at the end. Please use the question panel on the right-hand side and type your questions, and we will take it from there. All right, now, please welcome our main speaker, Simon Townsend, Chief Technologist, AppSense. Hey, Simon, I welcome you to the technical webinar series, and let me now hand it over to you.
Thank you very much, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everybody that is on the call. I've got about 30 minutes to 40 minutes worth of content to take you guys through, and in terms of an agenda, we really wanted to start by looking at Windows 10 in the enterprise. I wanted to talk you through a concept which I call migrate versus move and improve. And then we wanted to get into the main topics of today's webinar, which was around what are our top 10 tips for Windows 10 readiness. And in we will save some time towards the end to ensure, for instance, that we have got time for questions, for instance. So without further ado, thank you to all of you for joining, and let's kick off with the presentation. There is no doubt about it, Windows 10 is one of the most anticipated versions of the Windows operating system in recent times. In fact, the world for a long, long time, rightly or wrongly, has been stuck on Windows XP for anywhere between 5 and 15 years. And whilst many organizations have now taken the plunge and moved up to Windows 7 and Windows 8, Windows 10 continues to be a hot topic for end-user computing, and within the majority of at least the customers that I speak to, and within the marketplace. You can see there that Microsoft are currently reporting that approximately 75 million devices are already running Windows 10. I think it would be fair to say that whilst the majority of those are in the home and pro versions of their operating system, it is very rapidly becoming the operating system of choice within the enterprise, and organizations are now either starting to test or at least plan their strategies around a Windows 10 moving forward. As many of you will know, Windows 10 does promise to offer the perfect balance between the requirements of enterprise IT and the needs and the demands of the user. As an example, for the user, the start menu is back and the operating system is tailored to suit both the traditional laptop and desktop, but also optimized for new devices such as the Surface and other new devices that are coming out. So that really gives the user the best possible user experience, something that is familiar yet innovative. For IT, the new operating system on Windows 10 promises to be more secure, yet just as manageable, and allows updates and features to be drip-fed over time, changing, for instance, the way in which perhaps IT has looked at managing Windows in the past. All in all, it's really focused on how can we make our users more productive, yet at the same time, how can we continue to secure and manage our end-user computing state regardless of the platform that Windows is being and our applications are being delivered on. The new operating system also promises to bring together a single platform across multiple devices. And in a world where the user has more than one device on a daily basis, a single platform really starts to move towards reducing the overall cost associated with managing our Windows end-user computing as well. And I think as we see and look forward to the end of the year and we look forward to 2016, not only will we see traditional laptop devices and virtual desktops continue to grow, but we'll also see more from, for instance, the Surface Pro series, but also other vendors as they start to incorporate and adopt a lot of the new Windows 10 features that come out. We've also been introduced and are going to be introduced to new ways in which we can deploy applications. So for instance, the business store and the company's portals now also start to change the way in how applications can be deployed. From an IT point of view and a business point of view, we're going to need to ensure that we can support both our traditional application deployment methods and traditional applications, but also how can we start to enable and manage these universal applications as they're called. And Office 2016 is a good example of this, where Microsoft are now offering the ability to download either what they term the traditional desktop application or in fact the universal version of that application. The big question, however, really comes down to when do we migrate? So whilst the consumer version and the pro versions are currently being updated, and there's obviously, as we all know, an in-place upgrade happening for many of those devices, the real question is whether enterprises should upgrade, and perhaps not whether you should, but when you will. Microsoft, as most of you will know, is moving to a formula of regular system updates and will drop features in on a drip-fed basis as opposed to overhauling the operating system on a less frequent basis. The chances, therefore, are that organizations are likely to take a far more phased approach to rolling out Windows than a big bang, and it's very likely that there'll be multiple versions of Windows 10 within your estate. Some, for instance, will have been rolled out sooner than others. Some may have been updated with newer features than others. But the concept, perhaps, of the standard managed gold build of Windows perhaps is something that, whilst ideal, is something that may require us to change how we manage IT. And I think it's just important to note that that cadence of Windows will continue to increase and be far more frequent than perhaps what we've seen previously. So the big question may well be whether to migrate now or migrate later, whether it's towards the end of the year or whether it's in 2016. But the question that I typically ask people is, why just migrate? And lots of organizations have already been through a lot of time and invested a lot of money, for instance, in moving off Windows XP in recent years. And whilst Windows 10 offers so much, some may ask, well, is there another way? Do I always need to migrate? Do I always need to go through this big bang migration and perhaps this the project and the pain, dare I say, that people may have experienced when they went from Windows XP to Windows 7? Both AppSense and Citrix work with a number of customers who are currently considering an upgrade or a migration. And as I said, the reason and the question that we commonly ask is, well, why just migrate? And common things that we hear about, for instance, are, this needs to be the last migration we ever do. We can't afford to spend the same amount of money that we spent on our previous migrations just to get us up to Windows 10. How do I deal with that cadence change in Windows 10? And possibly, if I do migrate to Windows 10, I don't want to have to go through it. I don't want to have to go through it again. Well, AppSense believes that there is a way of solving that problem, and we believe in managing the user separately from the operating system and the applications, we can start to release some benefits and not just ease the migration to Windows 10, but also mean that we never have to migrate again. And when we're in a world that I call a constant state of migration, and users are jumping from one platform to another, from desktop to VDI to Citrix, for instance, and multiple different OS versions, we really need a way now in which we can move users and not migrate them. So before I go into how AppSense can help, I wanted to get started on what our top 10 tips or what our top 10 considerations are to ensure that we are ready for a Windows 10 migration or upgrade. And tip number one, recommendation number one, is to really aim for a seamless and timely migration. Any migration obviously should be as seamless as possible, as not to affect the cost around IT and business as usual from a management point of view, but also to be as seamless as possible to the user so that they can continue to work and continue to be productive. And whilst a seamless upgrade requires, or typically requires, some planning and some testing, there's also another pressure here, which is that the Pro versions and the Home versions of Windows are already updating themselves. And hence the user expectation perhaps is one that, why have I not got Windows 10 yet? So these two things are competing against each other. So we do really feel that we need to somehow move towards, yes, it needs to be seamless, but at the same time, there's no reason why we couldn't, for instance, make a start sooner rather than later. And one of the questions that we have to ask ourselves is, well, will it be a true migration? Will it be a lift and a shift? Will it be an in-place upgrade? Or in fact, will it involve a desktop transformation? Will it involve, for instance, new devices? eWeek, for instance, surveyed a large number of organizations and reported back that 73% of larger organizations would actually use the opportunity of Windows 10 to actually move to Windows 10 optimized devices, which may include the Surface, but also other new, for instance, devices from other manufacturers as well. When it comes to the strategy, I suppose there's a number of questions that need to be asked as well. Can we afford to do an in-place upgrade? Will an in-place upgrade work for us? Does our hardware, for instance, support Windows 10? Do our applications continue to work in Windows 10? Yes, the difference between Windows 7, Windows 8 and Windows 10 is far less than what it was when we did our Windows XP migration, but do we still need to go through and test those applications? Do we want to try and do a big bang rollout or and get the job done quicker, or do we want to live in a world where we may well have a mixed environment and a phased environment? And does that suit our business? Are we able, for instance, to have a mixed environment, and do the users, and will the users need to use a mixed environment? Just because a user gets a Windows 10 device, does that necessarily mean that they don't need to run applications from an older legacy environment? And that really then brings in the question of, and the value in what Citrix Zen App and Zen Desktop can bring as well. There's no doubt about it that delivering a desktop via Zen Desktop or delivering applications via Zen App can actually help with that migration and accelerate that migration as well. And also to understand, well, what are you migrating? Are you changing the applications? Is, for instance, the migration also going to introduce a migration of Office at the same time? And is there any data that also needs to be migrated as well? The second thing that we'd like to talk about, and the second tip really, is around that point I was making earlier, which is why just migrate? Why not look at transforming how, for instance, you manage the desktop and actually improving the user's experience as we go? And I think this is summarized quite nicely in my fishbowl slide here, where typically we have literally just taken users from one operating system to the next, from one device to the next, and not really perhaps given any consideration for how we could improve that user experience, improve our end user computing environment, actually allow users to become more productive, and yet perhaps look at securing the environment, optimizing the environment, and perhaps even reducing the overall CapEx and OpEx associated with that environment. So for AppSense and for Citrix, we sort of talk to our customers when we're talking about Windows migrations about, well, how can we continue and in fact enhance and deliver a familiar, consistent, performance, secure yet flexible environment which ultimately drives happy users and productivity. But before we can do that, perhaps what we need to do is actually understand what's going on in that environment so that we can actually get some feedback from our users. And there are a number of items listed there, a number of items which, for instance, both Citrix and AppSense can help with. But really it's important when doing a migration is to perhaps understand some of those pain points and some of that experience that could be improved as part of that migration. Do your users currently have logon time issues? Are there profile corruptions? Are their desktops locked down, or do they have full-blown admin rights? Are there memory crashes, CPU bottlenecks? Are there pains around application compatibility or application installation? What is the CISO telling the end user computing teams that they need to do regarding admin rights and privilege management, for instance? And how do our users access their data? Where is the data stored? And how do people actually get hold of their own personal files and folders? And a lot of that starts by looking at how we can identify those pain points. And there are a number of tools and solutions out there that can help with that. And so tip number 2 really is to make sure that we can understand in the first instance, how do we start to measure, for instance, user experience, and how therefore can we start to then plan and improve upon that when we do a migration. Tip number 3 is all around migrating user settings to Windows 10. Windows profiles are what makes the PC personal. User persona, user settings, which reside in the Windows profile, includes many things. My user's wallpaper, their Outlook signatures, their favorites, the custom dictionaries and the layout of their applications, for instance. And whilst roaming profiles can move this user persona from one machine to another, the approach that traditional roaming profiles takes means that they're not typically able to move well across the network, nor are they able to move from one operating system version to another. Windows 10 introduces version 5 of the Windows profile. It means that a user persona and settings from an existing version of Windows, perhaps Windows XP, Windows 10, Windows Vista, won't typically move across to Windows 10. And that means that when we're trying to do a seamless migration and improve user experience, the last thing we want to do is to leave behind what could be anywhere up to 50 years worth of persona from their existing desktop as we move them to the new one. So tip number 3 is really about investigating profile management technologies that are out there and ensuring that you have a way of gathering the user's existing settings, their existing persona, or as AppSense calls it, their existing DNA, and capturing that off the old platform and bringing it onto the new one so that their applications and their desktop looks familiar, it looks consistent, and in fact that it continues to perform and allows that user to move from one platform to another, not necessarily migrate. Once you've done that and you've actually looked at a profile management technology and perhaps even implemented one, not only is it going to help you with the migration to Windows 10, but it's also going to help you move that user in the future to newer versions of Windows. So as the cadence of Windows increases and we start to update Windows on a more regular basis, and we also have more mixed environments that include VDI, Zen Desktop, Zen App, and also the cloud, for instance, cloud-based desktops, users' persona can roam from one machine to another without worrying about the underlying Windows profiles that are being used. Tip 4 continues that theme and starts to talk about how we look at migrating user data. User data actually can in fact be an even bigger problem than user persona. And in the same way that user persona needs to be managed and moved to Windows 10, so does their data. Users' files and folders can be stored in a number of different places. And for many, the data resides on the user's laptop or on their desktop. Data is not typically accessible from any other platforms, nor is that data commonly backed up in a central location. One of the biggest challenges that IT faces is understanding where users save their data. Are they saving it onto the desktop? Are they saving it in My Documents? Are they saving it, for instance, to their D drive? When moving to a new operating system like Windows 10, and in fact possibly even a new device like the Surface or any of these newer Windows 10 optimized devices, data migration can be as painful as migrating applications due to that unknown location and also the size of user data. And whilst there are a number of tools, Windows utilities like offline files, for instance, and in fact the cloud, which can help, migrating that data continues to be a challenge for lots of organizations. And our recommendation would be to identify, as we suggested in tip number 2, to firstly understand the size of the problem, understand the size of data that users have, and also understand the locations that they're in. Where are those users saving that data, and what type of files do they have, and how big they are. Only then what we can do is start to look at how we start to then migrate that data. Can we collect that data in the same way that we need to collect the user's persona and centralize it? And once we've centralized it, we know we can back it up, and once we've centralized it, we know we can then redeliver it, synchronize it back down to a new device or a new operating system. So again, we're not just looking at how we can migrate data, but how we can perhaps improve data access moving forward in terms of security, in terms of DR and failure, etc. Tip number 5 talks around the need to meet the demand of increased mobility. New devices really drive the mobility of our users. Our users' expectations and their demands to work from anywhere also drive mobility. Anyone that's worked with Citrix for a long time will know that they have and have spoken for many, many years about any, and being able to deliver any application to any device anywhere. And that's more true today than ever before. With mobile networks improving in speed, with home networks improving in speed as well, the user has the ability to work from anywhere, and users are far more mobile than they've ever been. And these new devices and Windows 10 continues to add to the ability to allow our users to be more mobile. But with mobility comes a need to be able to control in a slightly different way. Not only do we have an issue with managing at a device level, but perhaps we now also have a challenge when it comes to managing users at a user level. No longer in the mobile world can I just manage my policies or secure my device based perhaps on what device I'm logging on to, or what my username is, or what group within Active Directory I'm part of. So context, in fact, as far as AppSense is concerned, plays a massive part in how you start to look at managing Windows 10 and devices. So regardless of whether the desktop is being delivered by Zen App, Zen desktop, or whether it's on one of these new, more mobile devices, the need to contextually control the user starts to come into play. And so, for an example, not only do I want to enforce policies and security on me as a user based on the fact that I'm on a surface connecting into Citrix and I'm a member of the technical team, but I also need to look at where I'm actually coming in from. Am I dialing in via a particular NetScaler, for instance? Am I in a certain location, in a certain office, on a certain floor? And do I need to change the environment and change my access and my security policies based on that context? So mobility, whilst Windows 10 and new devices drive mobility, mobility also drives a need, in our opinion, to manage the user independently and improve the amount of contextual control we put around them. Tip number 6 talks about creating a secure yet flexible environment. An age-old challenge in the Windows world has been, how do you secure the PC or the Windows desktop when half of that computer is supposed to be personal? PC stands for personal computer at the end of the day, and regardless of whether the desktop has been virtualized or whether it's running natively, people like a personal experience. And users' expectations today is that a personal experience allows them to run applications, download applications, and install applications which perhaps have not necessarily been included as part of the gold build or been delivered via IT. On one hand, you can lock down a Windows desktop so that users are not local admins. They can't install anything and they can't run certain applications. They can only run the known good. On the other hand, you could make all of your users local administrators and allow them to install and run anything. The issue is that neither is ideal. One is far too restrictive for the user and prevents productivity. The other is obviously a significant risk to IT. So tip number 6 really asks the question, in a world where cyber threats are far more targeted than ever before, and operating systems are either far more mobile or they're sat in your data center, how do you start to secure that Windows environment yet allow the user to be agile? And our recommendation is to find technologies and look at technologies which allow users to have maximum flexibility and control, but without placing such a tight control around them that they can't be productive. Advanced whitelisting technologies, auditing capabilities, contextual awareness and self-authorization can help play a big part in protecting, for instance, against the unknown and protecting against things like crypto lockers, which, for instance, traditional methods cannot pick up, yet at the same time allow me to run authorized applications such as Visio and Word and Excel, and at the same time perhaps offer compliance or control licensing around those known good applications as well. Which leads me quite nicely on to tip number 7, which talks about implementing least privilege. Lots and lots of organizations, for instance, did their Windows XP to Windows 7 upgrade, but due to application compatibility or due to certain tasks that the user needed, still unfortunately gave their users local administration rights. And this continues to be a problem in a world where cyber threats and security is ever increasing. And the message here is pretty simple, which is instead of giving our machines or our users local admin privileges, why not give the applications and the tasks the privileges that they need, therefore allowing us to deploy Windows in a far more secure way, but only allowing those tasks and those applications which require admin privileges to have them. The other thing to ask there is who is causing the concern. We talk a lot about users having local admin rights, but in many organizations perhaps it's developers or administrators themselves that are causing the problems. So the need to de-elevate can be just as important as elevating, for instance. Tip number 8 continues that theme around application and privilege management and asks the question, is there a need or a desire to utilize a corporate app store, or in fact allow users to get access to the Windows App Store and use these new universal apps. And if we do allow that to take place, and we do allow users to start to bring in some of those consumer-based elements into our corporate desktop, how do we plan to control them? Do we need to block certain known applications? Do we want to put some contextual control around that? And so again, we need to start looking at the ability of application control and least privilege management so that not only we can control traditional applications, but also those ones perhaps that we are delivering via new means such as the App Store and or, for instance, any other way of packaging applications, whether it be SCCM or AppV, for instance. Tip 9 moves us on to a concept where we need to try and reduce the overall cost when it comes to deploying and managing the operating system and the applications. And this is something that I talk to a large number of our partners and our customers about, but it's a concept which actually helps save both CapEx and operational cost when looking at deploying end-user compute. And it's all around packaging once, deploying and configuring many times. So whether it's the operating system and moving towards the ideal of a gold image and having a single build, or whether it's, for instance, where we're packaging up or deploying applications, there are a number of technologies out there today, and, for instance, technologies from Citrix, which will be announced shortly, which help standardize and allow us to image and package and build machines in a far more cost-effective way. But when we're building those machines in that far more cost-effective way, and we're, for instance, creating a single image and we're packaging up, for instance, AppV type applications or SCCM applications once, there is obviously a need to configure and personalize those applications on a per user or on a contextual basis. And so again, there are a number of technologies which help us reduce the overall cost of management in end-user computing, but then again, they drive a need to look at how do we manage the applications and the users independently of the platform being used to deliver the operating system. And the last tip is obviously to plan for a hybrid type of environment. I'm yet to meet an organization who has gone 100% of a single solution. So whilst new devices are available and whilst Windows 10 promises to deliver a far richer user experience in a far more manageable way, there are going to continue to be multiple ways in which we look at deploying data, applications and operating systems to our users. You know, the work that Citrix has done recently and continues to do about bringing Zen Desktop and Zen App together mean that it is far more common now for users to consume applications and data which is being delivered in a number of different ways. The future allows us, for instance, to expand our desktop estates out to the cloud. It allows us to tear up or build and tear down, should I say, a large number of desktops very, very quickly. We know we're going to have phased migrations to Windows 10. We know that therefore our environment's going to be far more heterogeneous than perhaps they've ever been before. And so any solutions and any technologies that you look at should also cover off and include the ability to go multi-platform, cross-platform. And regardless of which operating system you're using, regardless of how that operating system is being delivered, what platform it's being delivered, whether it's thick or thin, and how those applications are being delivered, the user does need the ability to roam between them so that they can work in both a hybrid environment, but then when the next iteration or the next platform decides to be released, we don't have to go through that migration pain again. So in summary, AppSense and Citrix can help with a number of these particular areas that we've covered off, whether we're looking at a seamless and timely migration, whether we're looking at actually a desktop transformation versus a migration, whether we're looking at migrating user settings and/or data and meeting the demands of mobility, Citrix and AppSense together have a number of technologies which can achieve this. We also have got the ability to secure those environments, yet still provide that level of flexibility. We can, with the AppSense technology, implement least privilege management. We can control universal applications. We can put that contextual control around both configuration and security that I was referring to earlier. And most importantly, everything we do goes across every single one of those platforms that were mentioned in the previous slide. So regardless of how you're deploying those desktops and our applications, there is an ability with our technology to help you configure, optimize, secure, and report on the end user computing environment, regardless of the deployment technology. We call this, we wrap this technology up in something we call user environment management, and it is delivered by a product suite that's made up of a number of different components. I'm not going to spend any time today talking about those individual products, but needless to say that more information can be gathered at www.appsense.com, or feel free to reach out to either Citrix or AppSense directly and ask to speak to your local sales representative. And with that, I will hand back over and we'll open the call up for some questions.
Hey, thanks so much, Simon. That was a wonderful presentation. And now let's move on to the question and answer session. So we have received good questions here, and I'll be picking up one by one from the queue. So Simon, so here's the first question. How can AppSense help existing Citrix customers move to the Zen Desktop and Zen App 7.6? Can you take that?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, of course I can. So that really comes back to, I think it was probably tip 3 and tip 4, to be perfectly honest with you, as at least as a starting point. You know, when you're looking, particularly if you're on an older version of Citrix, the chances are that you are going to bring a new Zen Desktop 7.6 or Zen App environment up in parallel to the existing environment. And one of the things that you're going to want to bring across is obviously their settings, their persona, their DNA, and that includes their Windows profile and potentially their data as well. And AppSense can obviously capture a lot of that information, in many cases without being installed on the existing environment, and ensure that that user has a seamless migration to Zen App or Zen Desktop 7.6. And in fact, where we have been jointly deployed with those new versions of Zen App and Zen Desktop, we've actually achieved somewhere in the region of a 33% increase in the rate of adoption. So we've actually been able to move people across significantly quicker onto the new platforms and be able to take a phased but quite a large bulk move for that. Typically, if you're on an old version, particularly if there's anybody out there still on MetaFrame 4.5, for instance, they're probably going to be on an older version of the Windows OS as well. And so there are various challenges around the different profile types that are being used on one version of Windows to another. So I think, yeah, what I want to say in summary on that question is we would help we would help move users to those new versions of Citrix significantly quicker and more seamlessly than without. I'd also suggest that there are other elements of AppSense which can help in that new environment around performance, security, and logon times to actually ensure that you're improving the user experience in the new environment. And for instance, delivering that Zen Desktop as quickly as possible when a user logs on, or delivering that application in Zen App as quickly as possible when they decide to launch an app.
Great. All right. Here's another question. Do you see a difference between the upgrade from Windows XP to 7 versus Windows XP to Windows 10?
Yeah, yes, yes, I do, and I think I sort of hinted at a little bit of that during my presentation. When we went from Windows XP to Windows 7, there were a number of things to consider. One of them was data, and how do I get 15 years worth of data from one device onto another. The other was users' settings, so their Windows profile, and the fact that we've gone from a V1 to a V2 profile. But the big one was around application compatibility. I think Citrix themselves obviously have got a number of tools like AppDNA, for instance, which can also help with that as well. I think probably there is less concern with the move to Windows 7 around application compatibility. However, I think it would be foolish that no organization is not going to have to go through some element of basic testing to ensure that their applications continue to work. So I think with technology that's available from both Citrix and AppSense, we can continue to help test and then migrate applications, user settings, and user data from one operating system to the other.
Okay. Here's another one. How does AppSense integrate with NetScaler?
Very good question. So we released some updates to our product portfolio earlier this year, and part of that contextual control that I spoke about, when we configure the user environment, we personalize it, we secure it, now allows us to, out of the box, query the NetScalers that are being used and how the user is actually accessing their Zen app or Zen desktop environment. So as a very simple example, if a user logs on to a Citrix environment from inside the office and decides to run 10 applications, those applications can be configured, personalized, and secured by AppSense. If the user then decides to disconnect from that Citrix environment, go home and then reconnect into that Citrix environment over the internet through a NetScaler or through a particular NetScaler to the same desktop that you left running earlier in the day, AppSense can understand the context of that user and understand that the user is now accessing that environment from a different NetScaler or via a different means, and therefore start to terminate, control, change, optimize, and configure that Citrix environment differently. So we're actually utilizing, whilst we're installed on the Zen desktop and the Zen app environment, we've got the ability to actually feed off information that's coming from the NetScaler system. That means that some fairly clever stuff can be done, which is particularly useful when it comes to licensing, compliance, and organizations that are regulated, particularly, for instance, like in the finance or centralized government industries.
How can AppSense help lower the overall CapEx and OpEx of deploying Windows 10 and Citrix?
A number of ways. So we have the ability to enhance the performance of a Citrix environment, so we can actually increase the user capacity. So typically on a Zen app environment, AppSense can help increase the number of users on a Zen app environment between 20 and 40%. That obviously has a direct impact on the amount of CapEx required for such an environment, particularly around hardware, number of servers, for instance. From an operational, on OpEx point of view, one of the big areas, and there are a few, but one of the big areas is around the removal and the reduction of profile corruption. So within App's profile management solution is able to remove almost all profile corruptions, or at the very least move them from being a third-line support call down to a first line, or in fact even a self-service element, which actually reduces the operational cost of supporting a Windows and or a Citrix environment. There are also other quite significant and very fast return on investments that can be seen by using AppSense to control per device licensing in a Citrix or Zen desktop or Zen app environment, for instance. So anyone looking at deploying Visio or Project in those environments will know that per device licensing can be quite costly, and AppSense can help actually control where and when those applications are being executed, and actually reduce the overall capex associated with something like a Visio or a project license. And they're just a couple of examples. Some of the more softer costs can obviously be seen by a reduction in user logon times. It's still not uncommon for us to see logon times which stretch over 1 minute, over 1.5 minutes, in fact even over 5 minutes for some customers. And working at the right level within Windows and hooking into Citrix at the right level, AppSense has got the ability to be very granular in how it sets up and configures an environment to achieve, in the majority of cases, a sub 15-second logon, and that obviously has a direct link to the productivity of a user, and therefore obviously the return on the investment that an organization gets from using AppSense with Citrix, and in fact across any Windows-based environment.
That surely helps, yes. Is there a particular size of customer or industry that benefits from using AppSense with Citrix?
No, not at all. I think the largest Citrix customer that AppSense currently works with is somewhere in the region of 120,000 Zen app, Zen desktop users. The largest physical deployment of AppSense is way above 140,000 users, and some are growing. But likewise, there are Zen desktop and Zen app customers who have got 2 Zen app servers that serve 60 users. So a lot of it comes down to the need to either secure and configure the environment in an optimized way. AppSense customers, yes, we do a lot of work in centralized government, we do a lot of work in education. 17 of the top 20 banks utilize AppSense, but there is no one particular market or vertical that needs or doesn't need, should I say, or utilize our technology. Legal, insurance, all the way down to even small tech organizations. And that dynamic is also changing as well at the moment, to be honest with you. As we start to look at the work that we're going to be doing with Citrix Cloud Workspace and their target market, and people that we're working with at the moment who are moving their desktops to the cloud, the use cases are starting to change, and the need, for instance, to manage the user independently is continuing to grow. So yeah, no, there's no one type of vertical or one type of customer that does or does not need AppSense.
So here's another one. Have Microsoft provided AppSense access to more API, allowing greater control over the desktop look and feel? That was not feasible on Windows 8 as Microsoft did not release API.
That is a very good question. Yes, we are currently. I mean, we are a certified Microsoft ISV, so our software has to go through a certain level of certification to keep, for instance, our levels of accreditation, and we do have access to certain parts of Microsoft which allow us, for instance, to hook in at a very low level of the operating system, for instance, and to actually feed off certain elements of the operating system as a machine starts up and a user logs on. It is fair to say, however, at the moment that when it comes to Windows 10, and particularly that new look and feel start menu, that some of the technology that is being used to personalize and configure that start menu is locked deep inside Windows, and even a roaming profile at this stage is having some challenges in keeping some of that look and feel consistent across multiple devices. So my current understanding is that Microsoft are working on areas of that in terms of allowing other people and other vendors to get access more easily to it. Having said that, we have already done and have been doing some testing for quite some time, and there is a fair amount that we can do today from an AppSense point of view. You know, as a machine, as a user logs off and a machine shuts down, as a machine starts up and the user logs back on again, there are a number of things that our agent and our technology can do to ensure that we can capture various elements of the Windows 10 desktop, and you know, we've recently, in our latest release, as some people may know, enhanced our logon triggers, for instance, to include what we call pre-session and post-desktop created, which means we're hooking significantly earlier at logon, which means we can set things like screen resolution and DPI, and we're also then able to trigger things once the desktop is launched. So we can actually get a Zen desktop or a Windows desktop shell launched significantly quicker, and then delay a lot of the logon items to post that shell being created. And we continue to just evolve and improve on that. There are some service packs due out over the next month or so, which will continue to add features and functionality around Windows 10 in that area particularly.
Cool. Okay, so we'll try to take 2 more questions. What versions of AppSense agents are supported for Windows 10?
Yeah, I think that leads quite nicely on to from the other question actually. AppSense already offers support for Windows 10. Any one of our customers that is looking to test or roll out Windows 10 is fully supported by AppSense. We've just updated appsense.com and support.appsense.com with a new look and feel website, which has also got customer and partner portals in it. On there you will find compatibility matrix, for instance, and information around Windows 10 compatibility. So anything that we have done, any functionality or features to date that we're working on Windows 7, Windows 8, Windows 8.1, are working on Windows 10. I actually have a Surface sat in front of me right now. It was running Windows 8.1 with all of the AppSense agents on it, so everything from Environment Manager and Application Manager through to even our new products, Insight and Data Now. That did an in-place upgrade to Windows 10, and Windows 10 continues to be managed and secured by AppSense on my device. So compatibility and support is there today and has been since release. What we are doing and are continuing to do over the next 6 to 12 weeks is to release a number of service packs which adds additional conditions and functionality which is specific to Windows 10. So compatibility is there, but there are some specific Windows 10 features that we want to roll in, and some specific Windows 10 conditions that are currently missing that will be rolled up within some service packs that are coming out later this month and next.
Mm-hmm. Does AppSense offer a user-level firewall?
It does, yes. I'm not sure my marketing team would like me to refer to it as that. Our application manager technology sits on a Windows-based desktop, whether it be physical or virtual, or in fact Zen app, and it has the ability to control application execution. So can the user is the user allowed to run and execute a particular application? It can also choose to elevate or de-elevate that application in terms of permissions, and it can also then control what network ports and network addresses that user and or application has got access to. So a common use case would be that people want to prevent what I call the double hop. they want to prevent a user logging into a Citrix environment and then using that Citrix desktop to then hop onto another Zen app, Zen desktop environment, or in fact another network resource. So we have the ability to limit what websites and URLs people can go to, but we've also got the ability, for instance, to stop the Microsoft Terminal Services client from accessing a particular IP address on a particular port number. So I wouldn't necessarily call it a firewall, but I would definitely say that yes, we've got the ability to do network access, application network access control. More of an outbound firewall, I suppose, than an inbound, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. So last
if anyone wants, if the caller wants more information on that, then feel free to drop me a line directly or an email directly, simon.townsend@appsense.com.
Yes. And the last question, and we'll wrap it up from here. Can I use Profiler to run my environment without AppSense?
Can I use, is AppSense mandatory for Zen apps and desktop? No. So AppSense is not mandatory for Zen app or Zen desktop, although obviously AppSense would like to think that it could be, but it's not mandatory. Can I use the profiler to run my environment without AppSense? I'm not sure what's being asked, but I'm going to assume that perhaps there is a question there around gathering and information from the existing environment. And you know, when we were talking around tip 1 about understanding your existing environment and profiling your users, understanding their logon times, understanding where their data is, what applications are being used, there is obviously a technology that we offer that can do that. Can that be used to understand an existing environment, even if I'm not going to use AppSense moving forward? The answer to that is yes, it can be.
Thanks. Thanks, Simon. We are restricted by time bound, so we will wrap it up now. Also, I see many attendees asking for the slides and recording of this webinar. And like Sherry answered, yes, this will be provided, and we will send it out in a day or two to your registered email ID. With that said, we are about to end today's webinar. I want to take a moment again and thank our speaker, Simon from AppSense, for making this fantastic presentation and sharing the knowledge with us. And last but not the least, I want to thank each one of you who are attending our webinar today in the Citrix Ready Technical Webinar Series. And this shall conclude our broadcast. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to Citrix for hosting. Appreciate it.